What I tend to see the most is a disconnect between the engineering teams and the exec. I'm not building, I'm not shipping, I want to go faster. I tend to work laterally across those businesses because you can talk different languages and translate, and because some execs can't talk engineering and many engineers can't talk business.
They have this whole business plan and this whole idea of where they're taking their business, which is amazing. But then there's nothing from the tech side that aligns with that business strategy.
And there's no bridge. So essentially what it sounds like you're doing as well is helping them build that bridge to get to those longer term outcomes and goals. IT is always a cost center. It's always justify your existence, save money, or improve operation.
You're essentially a high-speed plug-and-play CTO.
No one wants to hear the new part. So the worst thing you can do is open your mouth.
Whether hosting the Tech Insider podcast or guiding global enterprises through digital evolution, Nick Hume brings clarity to complexity. In this episode, we dive into the future of tech with one of the industry's sharpest minds. So welcome to the show.
Mike, thanks for having me. Great to chat to you today, and to your audience as well. So thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being here. So you're known as a fractional CTO. What does that actually mean, and why are companies turning to this model now more than ever?
Good question. So I think fractional has had a lot of different meanings over the years. It's kind of, it's typically started with, part-time or consulting, and sort of, honestly, it's a bit of both and somewhere in the middle. So it's, the way I'd like to position it is you get access as a fractional, whatever it happens to be. I happen to be a CTO and CIO, so on the technology side, but a fractional anything is sort of, on-demand access or retainer-based access to an executive, providing kind of leadership strategy and different types of help to that exec team where there might be a gap. There may be some help. In my example, I see a lot of teams that need software engineers to release more and build more and kind of get more outcomes. On the infrastructure side, there's sort of strategy and what do I do with my data center business, and how am I going to execute against some of these vendors and contracts. So really, fractional is getting access to someone who you might not need full time for startups, etc., but equally who can kind of jump in and unblock something at the for an existing team or existing business. So advisory type work, unblocking, and strategy-based engagements is where I sort of find myself. Again, if you look across the spectrum, there's fractional anything, CXOs. So from a CTO and a CIO, that's what I end up working on.
So when you walk into a company as a fractional CTO, what's usually the first red flag that you spot in their tech strategy?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think what I tend to see the most is a disconnect between the engineering teams and the exec. And so that's, again, from a CTO and a CIO point of view, there's often execs and management challenged with, hey, I'm not building and I'm not, shipping a lot of product or service or digital infrastructure, and I want to go faster, or that I'm not getting the agility I need. So all those things. So really, part of what I do is this is tech whisperer type function, and it's a translation layer or a decoder ring or whatever you want to call it between the exec and that engineering team, because some execs can't talk engineering and many engineers can't talk, business and sort of on the other side. So I tend to work laterally across those businesses as opposed to sitting in a vertical, and that horizontal view, because you can kind of talk the different languages and translate, that tends to be the problem. Honestly, that's more than 50% of the time. Actually, probably more than 80% of the time.
Yeah, I find, as a fractional CTO myself, I find two things. I find that either there's really nothing that qualifies as a tech strategy in place. They think there is, but there really isn't. I've had people say, I want to be able to expand into Europe in the next 5 years. Well, I see that as a business strategy, but not necessarily a tech strategy. And that brings me to the second point of what I see. They have this whole business plan and this whole idea of where they're taking their business, which is amazing. But then there's nothing from the tech side that aligns with that business strategy. So how are you supposed to get there when you're pulling yourself in two different directions? Those are the two huge red flags I always see. But like, I know,
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike. I think that, what I would add to that as well is what I do see is you see those long-term goals and those long-term strategies, and you see the day-to-day operation. So you've got a short-term kind of, timeline, and you've got a long-term. That mid-term, how do you stitch those two together, I think is where there's a lot of fall down and a lot of, thrashing of time wasting of those short-term decisions and actions, and the operation of the business, like fighting fires, trying to get to that long-term, and there's no bridge. So essentially what it sounds like you're doing as well is helping them build that bridge, to get to those longer term outcomes and goals.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's figuring out how to connect the day-to-day actions with the long-term goals. That's what's really missing.
Mm.
So in your notes, in the notes about you, I see that you've led some big projects at Microsoft and AWS. How did that shape how you now advise clients?
Great question. So I was very fortunate to work for both really big, interesting, companies during huge growth periods. When I was at Amazon in 2014, back in Sydney, I'm now in Seattle, as you can see, Mount Rainier in the background here. So obviously I'm Australian, but I set up some engineering teams in Sydney back in 2014. And the challenge we had was we were deploying something, very new to Amazon and very new to the technology stack, which was, white box network switches and routers into a large network, which was typically, Cisco, Arista, Juniper, like it was vendor-based hardware and vendor-based software. We were deploying, to try and build into an existing live network, which was at the time one of the biggest, and it remains even, much, much bigger and one of the biggest as well. Into that live network and serving a lot of traffic, this brand new architecture, brand new software. And so, what I was able to see was that high growth, a lot of ambiguity, and how do you scale up and out with what is already a large operation.
So that's interesting because you made a great point about not having been in certain positions, but still managing those people. But also, I know that you've helped companies scale data centers, cloud operations, mining operations even. How do you stay ahead in so many fast-moving industries?
It's a really good question. And I think I read a lot, right? Like, I think if you buried your head in the sand and came out a week later, a month later and stuff, like the world flies by. And so, I spend a lot of time reading, connecting in the network, like, you're nothing without the people that surround you. So building good teams around you, both internally and externally, right? They don't have to report to you to, be in your network, and have a conversation about these things. So, you find out a lot of things when you're friendly and you're not a jerk and you make an effort and sort of go out there into conferences. I spent a lot of time at various conferences, GTC last month, which is NVIDIA's annual one. OCP is at one I frequent, Supercompute. So I think by attending those, again, being somewhat, try and be as, nice a guy as possible, and curious, I think opens up a lot of doors. Reading a lot and staying, connected to trends, and having an opinion about things as well. It's good. It's not good just to say yes to everything and watch everything and say, I agree with it all. Putting a stake in the ground and having a conversation and disagreeing with people.
Yeah, I love that you said stay curious, because I've been one who throughout my career, I've worked in many different industries, and honestly, the role itself as a CTO, it doesn't really change much. You're still managing the tech stack. You're making sure that the strategies are right, but you do kind of have to understand the industry you're in, and that's how you do it, by being curious. And
I think, yeah, even on top of that, Mike, I think coming when you get to that senior leadership role, you've come from generally beneath that role, and you've seen you need to support the technology function. The IT function has always supported the other verticals of the business. So you don't get there by, keeping finance at an arm's length and keeping, annoying marketing and not doing what you need to do for sales. You need to work with those businesses on a daily basis, a weekly basis, to understand what they need, how to deliver it with technology. Can you save money? Can you improve processes? Can you improve yield? Whatever it happens to be, you're a manufacturing business, you're a software business, you're whatever. And so by allowing those conversations to take place, and building those relationships, you learn a little bit about finance and you learn a little bit about marketing and what makes them tick, what do they care about, how can you help them, and it just lifts all boats. So I think it's kind of, you need to look up and down, but also left and right, as you try to offer value.
Yeah, I was always surprised that like how much of a gatekeeper I had to be on changes because like I worked for a restaurant delivery service early on in my career, and what was cool about that company was they were started by two brothers and their best friend, and they started this business themselves. That one did one role, one did another role, one did another role, and then they hire employees to work with them, and as those employees grew with them, they found out, oh, this guy's really good at operations. Let's make him the operations manager. And this guy's really good at marketing. Let's make him the marketing manager. And they all kind of learned on the job. So one of the weaknesses of that, of course, is not understanding how all of those roles interact. And so then as the CTO, I'd get requests like, hey, see this report right here? I want to take this whole section out. Well, hold on. Have you checked with everybody else that they don't use that section? Because I can gladly give you a filter that filters that section out, but I don't want to necessarily remove it unless we ask other people. I have no problem removing it. So I'd always having to be a gatekeeper because they weren't completely understanding of other people's roles. But at the same time, then I'd get asked by people when you'd interview, well, if you've never worked in this type of company before, how are you going to learn the role? And I would think to myself, if they could make somebody the marketing director and he was quite successful having zero marketing skills, I think I can handle this. So like, how do you balance being the strategist, the coach, and execution guy all at one time? That's what happens in these positions.
Yeah, you get thrown in a lot of different roles, and just what you were saying before is it resonates with probably many people in this industry and these functions, because you end up being that connective tissue, the go-to person between these things. Like, I need to do this, how can I? It doesn't have to be related to technology, but it could be a process, it could be a system, it could be a service. Are you aware of? And so I think when that connective tissue is something I always, refer to it as, because you end up, laterally looking at things. It can be exhausting, right? I think the challenge is you can take on a lot of responsibility, in the CTO and the CIO function, because you're business focused, you're, cost focused, you're outcome based. But ultimately, like I said before, you're a cost center. So, wearing all those hats, and you're wearing one today, wearing all the different hats is challenging. So I think you've also got to be very disciplined on what you can say you can do, and where you can kind of, provide the best value. I've in my past, lives and different roles, I've fallen victim to saying yes to as many things as I could because I know I can help. And then I get to Sunday night and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm exhausted. I worked, all these things, and like, I'm helping all these people out. I'm not necessarily getting the credit for it. Not that that matters, but like with the impact that I'm providing is kind of lesser than what I could be if I focused on 10 things instead of 20, or 5 instead of, 15. And so it's, the discipline has to be there, but you only learn discipline by failing and realization and kind of that full circle look at yourself.
So essentially, if people want to understand this that don't, you're essentially a high-speed plug-and-play CTO. That's basically what it is when you do a fractional CTO.
I'm going to put that on my website. It's a good way to say it.
Yeah, it actually is a cool phrase, huh? How do you build trust and influence, though, so quickly in leadership teams?
That's a good question. So it's a very subjective thing. And every company and every team and every person in those teams is different. From the CEO you're reporting to and the board, to the junior engineer on one of the teams that you're responsible for. So what I like to do is initially is just listen, right? Go in, read, observe, watch, digest as much as humanly possible. In a couple of weeks, or depending on how much time we have. But I like to observe before I make any decisions, before I even open my mouth. No one wants to hear the new person, irrespective of the role they're in, and you have more scrutiny the higher up you are, by larger groups of people, that they know better, that they have lived and breathed and have scars from the things that other folks do. So the worst thing you can do is open your mouth. So you open your ears and listen and watch. And then, you start having these conversations. Like, you kind of observe people and go, well, who's someone in this team who's respected, who's influencing, who's, contributing well, who's motivated, who's passionate? Who are the people that are, negative, and why they're negative? Are they, poo-hooing something because what's the reason? And you can kind of excavate and uncover really interesting information, both with, just doing that observation piece up front, asking some very high level, maybe loaded, but high level questions initially to some of those key folks, staying interested and turning up to meetings and being on time, and, all those things that should be natural are actually super important when you're starting. Because if you blow off stand up, or you blow off you make last minute adjustments to an all hands, or you're unavailable, unapproachable, not friendly, you lose trust very quickly. And it's in those early days.
I think it's the path of least resistance, in a sense. You don't want to, I'll tell you, I watch a lot of YouTube, and I'll see these cop cam videos, and the cop will tell the other cop, oh, I'm going to be arresting this person. And it won't be 10 more minutes before they tell the person they're arresting the person. They know some things ahead of time, and they're going to still continue to do their investigation. And I think that's what leaders should be able to take from your answer, is that you're going to come into the situation, and who knows, maybe you see things crystal clear right away. Keep your mouth shut, hold that information inside, and continue to explore. And I think you put it perfectly, that what happens is people don't want to hear you come in as the new guy and say, oh, well, here's the problem. They themselves might even agree with you, but they're going to push back because they don't want the new guy to just walk in off the street and say that. So instead, let's just say, as an example, that you literally did come up, you found the biggest problem, and it's something you can solve, but it's not going to get solved overnight. Why not spend some time getting to know the people, find out who your allies might be, find out who are going to be the people who are always going to try to undermine you. Which other executive is the guy that's always poo-pooing technology, and you get to know the lay of the land. Then when you present the issue that you saw on day one, now it looks like you've done some investigation, and honestly, you have. I think that's huge. That was a great answer on.
Yeah. I think it is summarized in being patient, right? So you can be really gung ho and run 100 miles an hour and provide great impact to the CEO and go, hey, look at all this cool stuff we did, and I did, and I executed these things, and I fired these people, and it was come in guns blazing. And in some instances, it's rare, but that sometimes needs to happen. However, most times it's not like that, and most times you need to be patient and calm, collected, and you have your own plan. But it's like I said up front, you just observe, watch, and you can get a lay of the land pretty quickly. And to your point, the undermining things, like you've taken a role that someone else may have wanted. You've been brought in from the outside, coming in, and that was this VP over here, was gunning for that role, has been crushing work for 3 years, maybe not in the right areas and maybe not in the right visibility, or for whatever reason that person wasn't there. But they will hold that against you, whether you like it or not. And so, those personalities and that politics, you have to sort of navigate as well.
Especially as a fractional, because you might have somebody sitting there who's a full-time employee and was looking to get the role full-time. And then they're like, well, not only did they not hire me, but they don't even think they need a full-time person. And sometimes it's not even about need. I find the clients I get just can't afford the full-time person. And a lot of times there is not the need for you to be there full-time. But
And
so what's
and that's the advantage, and that's really the advantage, Mike, is that
Yes.
because you've got a great career, with breadth and depth and stuff, and so you can work faster in a smaller time
Yeah.
window, and get more done because you've seen it. You've had that experience instead of having to work it out and learn it for the first time. And spend full time doing so. That's the advantage of having someone with experience in any role, is that they can get more done in a smaller time window. So that's really the value of fractional is, it's accelerated, accelerated engagements and outcomes.
So what's the weirdest or maybe most unexpected problem that a client ever asked you to solve?
I think everything's kind of unexpected to some degree because you start solving problems and all of a sudden new ones pop up. And so I don't think I've ever, and they're sort of semi-related. So I can almost rationalize and justify how these problems come to me. Because if I'm managing a software engineering team and then like, oh, the network over here is like falling to pieces. Well, it turns out the software engineers need that to be functional and operational. And so like, I end up going over there and kind of doing some assistance. I do, it's more, I don't think I've had very many unexpected problems other than the ambiguity of dealing with the current ones and the related ones. So that's probably not a great answer to your question. But I sort of see things as, can I solve them? Yes or no? And I'm probably the first person to say things are outside of my, I can solve many things, but there's just some things like that's totally a legal thing, right? That needs someone
Right.
for general counsel or something. But yeah, I don't think I've got a good answer for you. Maybe on the second edition, I'll come back and I'll have a good example for you.
Good. Okay. So when you think about the future of tech leadership, what's the one mindset shift that today's executives need to make to go from stuck to full throttle?
Like I said before, I think there's a couple of things. One of them is, and it's normalized from my background because Amazon and Microsoft, especially Amazon, you can kind of experiment and fail and kind of learn and move forward. And the great thing with that company and many companies like it, hyperscalers, is that they're high growth, and so they can somewhat afford for you to fail because you're a small cog in a reasonably large cog, but in a huge, enormous wheel. And so there's a bit more flexibility there. Smaller companies can't necessarily afford to have people failing all over the place because they need to run a business, and there's no time or margins to sort of absorb some of that experimentation. But where possible, carving out time for R&D or for doing things differently and having cross-functional like I said, I'm from a different background, and I found myself managing these things and actually at times outperforming the folks that have been doing it for 10, 20 years. And I think what I used to do back at small businesses back in Australia was I would have shadowing sessions for my team to go into other organizations and other verticals for them to go and find what are their problems. Like, go and be a marketing person for a day, go into the sales team and find out what their problems are. Go and see what it's like on the phone calls. Like, how does their technology work? How does it not work? And so I think leaders should be more open to breaking down those silos, and that's the most overused thing in the world. But even if you take one brick out of that wall and you sort of peep through, you will see a hell of a lot more than if you just look up and down. So I think being open to those that lateral way of thinking has served me very well, and everyone that I've seen use it has sort of found benefit. And then I think as well, I've spent a lot of time in the AI space and HPC and digital infrastructure, and so I think what the enterprise hasn't really adopted yet is sort of broad, scaled out use of some of those systems and tools. People are dabbling, and so one of the things I would I educate or try and advocate for when in my engagements, though they're typically in those areas, so I don't need to advocate it as much. And companies actually producing the AI and the silicon and the clouds and stuff, so they know it. But it is using those things to good effect, and having if you need a policy, create a policy for it. Like, lean into those advantages and those accelerators rather than block, deny, and restrict your teams and verticals from leveraging what it could provide. Obviously you need to put some controls around it depending on your industry and the blast radius of if things go the wrong way. But I would advise heavily to lean into it, because it's an incredibly valuable accelerator, and today is the worst it will be, and it gets better every day. So that's a really good differentiator and enabler for businesses to go faster.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, why don't you let the listeners know how they can connect with you, though, in case they want to pick your brain some more?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mike. humeconsulting.co is my company website. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty vocal on there, so come and chat with me on LinkedIn. So Nicholas Hume is my, I'm Nick Hume I'm on there for on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. If you happen to use that, my tag is Cool Kids Do It. So I'll leave that there as well. I don't use it as much, but LinkedIn and through my website is the easiest, fastest way to go.
Well, Nick, it's clear, you're not just plugging into companies, you're powering them up. Thanks for your insight today, sharing your experience and that full throttle vision. Really appreciate it.
Mike, thanks for the time. I appreciate the chat. Thank you.
Great. Well, guys, if you enjoyed this conversation with Nick, be sure to check out his podcast, the Tech Insider Podcast, and visit humeconsulting.co to learn how he's helping organizations scale smarter and faster. And don't forget, new episodes of Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge drop every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific. Hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe so you never miss insights from tech leaders shaping the future.